you become what you give your attention to. And I think that
Yes.
really it begs the question for those watching and listening, what are you paying attention to right now? Because that is really going to impact how you spend your energy and how you invest your time. And
Yes.
if I think about what you're sharing here, 3 years, 700 classes, well, that's a lot of attention that you've given to, that you've paid to focus on your physical health, your physical well being that has impacted mental health, mental well being, that has impacted relational well being. I mean, all of these, it's all now interconnected. Why must we be more mindful of what we pay attention to as we move further into the age of AI, particularly as digital leaders?
Gosh, I honestly, I really just think it comes down to the subconscious, and what's happening subconsciously to the things that we're watching, we're reading, we're hearing,
Mm.
and how that really does influence our thinking and our decisions. I can look back on different periods of my life and, reflect and think, wow, like I think that's why I was, behaving that way, or that's why I thought these certain things. Like so much of it was tied to what I was, paying attention to, and, compare that to where I am now, and just the different mental space that I'm in. But I think it really boils down to the subconscious.
Well, when you start getting headlines like, Sam Altman from ChatGPT saying it was like 95% of marketing activities can be replaced by artificial intelligence within the next 5 to 10 years.
Right.
I think we have to be mindful of how we perceive even just those headlines. And in a world where attention spans run short and,
No
the
one's going to read all the way through.
exactly, you see the headline that is going to impact, has the potential to impact, unless you have a higher level of awareness, how you're perceiving the world around you, but also how you're perceiving the future. And one of the things that we've talked about in a previous episode is the idea of the future growth index,
Mhm.
because what you pay attention to is directly going to impact your perception of the future. And as
Yeah.
a leader, your perception of the future is directly going to impact how you make decisions now in the present moment to create or co create the future together with those on your team.
Yeah. Like coming from a place of fear,
Yes.
scarcity. Absolutely.
And I know you've been reading a book, The Psychology of Money.
Yes.
And the reason I want to bring this up is because when we think about what we're paying attention to, the idea of the transformation of work, um, bit of a hot topic. In fact, very recently had a coaching call with a financial brand leader who's on a senior leadership team. And one of the things that she shared was the board of directors is now wanting the executive team to start bringing people back into the office.
Mm.
Well, that is creating some conflict and tension uh, across the organization. And specifically on her team, she's already had two team members saying that if they have to come in more than 3 days a week, they're going to be gone. And
Yeah.
you can say, well, if you want a job, then you're going to have to come into the office. And then, but on the flip side, you see it's almost like an empowered employee. They have choice, they have options more than ever
Yes.
before. So it's a matter of perception.
For
It's
sure.
it's it's like, are you viewing the world, to your point? Are you viewing the world through a lens of abundance? Or are you viewing the world through a lens of scarcity? And how much
Well, it
is
begs the question, why?
it,
You
well,
know,
yes,
like
and expand upon that.
what's the root reason for wanting to come into the office? Like I think that's what we really need to uncover and get to the bottom of, because for you and I, we love getting together in person, and we do several times a month. But there's a reason we do that,
Mhm.
because of the physical energy we exchange, you and I have when sitting in a room together, And all of the and those days are all like future focused days where we're really moving the ball forward. So we have a purpose for that. I live an hour away. It's worth that hour drive for me there and back, several times a month to make that progress moving forward. But are you asking your employees to come in the office because you want to keep an eye on them,
Uh,
because there's not a lot of trust that they're getting their jobs done remotely? Is it, I guess for me, that's what I want to know is why.
well, then that's a fantastic point to you make about energy, which we just had the conversation on a previous podcast about, and it didn't even click on me at the time of the value of in-person connection. And I want to
Yeah.
be very clear. I am not saying 100% remote is the way to go, but I'm no longer in the camp of you have to be 100% in the office in person either. I'm
Yeah.
really I would say my current, and I always reserve the right to change my mind and change my opinion based upon new data, but really this idea of a hybrid like environment, because
Yeah.
the environment will directly impact energy, whether that's deep work focus, like we were talking about in the
Yes.
previous one, or in this particular case too, coming in together, what you're paying attention to.
Yeah. And it's also where do you work best?
Mm,
Some people want to have the option to go in the office so they can, have that focus and they're not having the distractions at home. And absolutely. And then there's some people who, like for me, it would be a struggle for me to come into the office every single day. It would take a toll on me, time, energy, attention to make that commute. And so having the hybrid does work best for sure. And I think that's what we have to look at. What is the best outcome? And then let's work backwards to get that input.
but this is where I'm going to loop in the psychology of money and something that you
Okay.
shared with me. It's this idea of how we think about work and the work that we do. It's something that I have written about in Banking on Change. I've been speaking about this. There are 4 seasons that lead to exponential growth when one perceives that they're growing personally and professionally at the same exact time. There's a season for learning, there's a season for thinking, for doing, and then ultimately for reviewing, to repeat the process, to review. You learn through the experience, to think about how you can do even better through the next iteration. Take us back to the 1800s. What was the perception of work back then, and how does that compare and contrast with where
Yeah.
we're at today as we move further into the age of AI?
Yeah, I found this very, very interesting just to kind of really sit and think about and look at the numbers. But back then, most of the work was labor, and so it wasn't. And let me get through this before judging what I'm about to say. But it's not about your thinking. It's about your doing. It is physical, tangible. Agriculture, crafts, manufacturing. So your job only existed at your job. There was nothing really for you to do when you got home. It was check in, check out. Whereas now that is flipped. And I have some data here that says 38% of jobs are classified as managers, officials, and professionals. These are decision making jobs. The other 41% are service jobs that rely on your thoughts. And so if we're constantly working in our heads, your heads aren't going anywhere. Your head's with you 24/7. So now we have this flip from, and even now, so, you may have like mechanics. They're going to go to work. They're going to work all day. When they punch out, they're done. But if you've got someone in marketing creating a marketing campaign, that's their mind, that's their thinking. That's not going to shut off. So now instead of the 6, 7, 8 hours you're working, at work during the day, you're going home, your mind's still on, you're cooking dinner, you're putting your kids to bed, you're driving around and your brain's still working on that marketing campaign in your mind, or it could be.
Mm,
So there's just this really weird, interesting bleeding over between so much of that physical work before and now the mental load. And I think that's why it's even more important to create this awareness so that we are able to prevent like that burnout and notice those times. I'm guilty of it too. I will be the one putting my kids to bed and I'm thinking about something, oh, it was a great idea. But I have to like be aware of that and just shut off and know and protect that mental energy, which ties back to our last conversation. I know.
Well, and I think that's the whole point, is why we broke this idea of asking the question, who's on your team, into these four distinct conversations, because there's a lot to unpack in each one of them. But the heart of the matter is they are really all interconnected here.
Yeah.
And when you think about what you do versus what you think,
Yeah.
it is my prediction, particularly even if you are in a quote unquote thinking like role today, that AI has the potential to go in and disrupt the doing. Um, I've really been encouraging people to begin to detach from what you do, to invest more into reviewing what has been done, to be a lifelong learner through
Yeah.
experience or through continued education, so that you can create even more value through your thinking and through your thoughts. Although execution is going to be critically important, it's just the way we execute could be exponentially transformed. And you're already seeing, and I know we're going to have a podcast conversation about this, of how
Yeah.
what you do yourself specifically has transformed since November 30th,
Yeah.
2022, with the launch of Chat GPT.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy for many of us, and I'm one of those people where I've typically attached my success or how well I'm doing to how well I'm doing to like what I'm doing. What is my output? What am I creating? What am I getting done? And so for me, that's been my measure of what did I get done today? What did I do today? Amazing, I killed it. How do you measure though your thinking? How do you measure your thoughts? How do we measure the time that I've spent now that I'm not doing some of that because of Chat GPT? Thank you. I have spent more time thinking and learning and growing. That's hard to measure.
Mm,
That's not tangible. And so then I think we get in this weird, uncomfortable, like, how do I prove my value when I'm not necessarily doing, but look at all this thinking that I'm doing.